That you're doing well wherever you are in the world. Michael Unbroken here. I want to spend some time with you this morning. I was thinking about this word toughness and the role that it plays in our journeys. And this is whether you are, in a trauma healing journey, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're just a human being. Like toughness feels like for lack of a better term, a prerequisite for the human experience. I think about this often, like how do you step into being a person that you're capable of being without toughness? And toughness isn't like always necessarily, this hard outward shell where you're looking out into the world as this angry, unkind, self-destructive person. I don't think about that in regard to toughness. What I do think about is resiliency. What I think about is how many of us have all, as human beings, face tremendous amounts of adversity in our life. There's just honestly no way around it. Just being alive elicits a certain level of toughness that you have to come into this understanding that you are going to have to either adapt with or to or develop. And the reason is because like the truth is, and people always say life is hard. I think there is a certain like scale and level of difficulty to life. Like that's easy, that's fair. I don't think anyone would argue that. But what I think more importantly we miss out on is the fact that being tough doesn't always mean that something bad had to happen to you. Being tough doesn't mean that life is somehow this awful experience. Being tough doesn't mean that you have to go through fire. It just means that in the moments when you have the opportunity to step into what's next in your life, that you show up for yourself. And toughness can be in every area and every aspect of our life, from the way that we show up in the world to the way that we handle business to the way that we communicate with people, and also the way that communication is reciprocated to us. It's really easy to get torn down when people have an opinion about us. And toughness, I think I go back to being a kid quite often, and I think about these moments in time in life where I wasn't necessarily tough, where it was a survival mechanism to get through the day, to do whatever it took to get through. And toughness often felt like, okay, if I show up today and I just try, can I succeed? If I show up today and I just put in effort, can I succeed? If I show up today and I just try to live my life, can I somehow make it through what's happening? And street toughness is, I think, very different. Growing up and hustling and selling drugs and breaking into houses and stealing cars and running with guns and hurting people, like that's a level of toughness like I don't wish on anyone. And there's an interesting juxtaposition in my life because at some points, and I think this holds true for everyone, at some points there was love in my life and there was some care given, and I would call that few and far in between. I mean, I would say the vast majority of my childhood especially I spent trying to be the tough kid, trying to be the kid with armor, trying to be the kid who nobody could get through or get to. And as an adult, that doesn't work, right? And I think about how toughness can get displaced as we step through whatever's happening in our childhood. Because look, at the end of the day, like your childhood, our childhoods, they inform who we are as adults. They help us make meaning of circumstance and situation. They give us the framework and baseline for what it means to be us. And because of many of us coming through, I would argue everyone's had a traumatic experience in childhood, right? Sometimes your brother jumps out of the closet and scares the shit out of you, and that like fucks you up forever. And every time you go to bed, you have to keep the lights on. You know what I'm saying? Like it can be as simple as that one single moment. And then sometimes it's darker. Sometimes it's a teacher. Sometimes it's a fellow student. Sometimes there's just different things in our lives that lead us to this place where we have to build up this exterior. We have to build up this part of us that becomes a defensive mechanism for some, and for other of resiliency. And I felt like often I fell right down the middle of the line on that. Sometimes it was a defensive mechanism and sometimes it was resiliency, but I got lost in the middle of it trying to understand which was which. And I think this holds true also as we are adults trying to navigate the world, looking at we have to be tough. Well, yes, I do think you have to be tough. You have to be fucking resilient. you're alive, right? The outside world is unforgiving, and it, like, real talk, even though I know it's hard to hear, that doesn't care about you. And that's not because you're not important, right? And that's not because other people don't love you. It's because everybody has a life and everyone has all these things going on. And so toughness comes in a couple of ways, I believe. One is looking at and understanding that there is a level to this life in which you unknowingly, and this was my experience. If I go back to like 21, 22 years old, one of my little brothers was like, dude, you're such an asshole. Like, I will never forget this. He like called me and he was like, you're such an asshole. You're never here. You never show up. You're never a part of this family. And, now as I head into my late 30s, closer to 40, I think about, okay, well, when I'm 22, those words didn't hit home because I was still thinking that toughness meant not letting anybody in. And that's what's really fascinating about the juxtaposition of understanding what it means to be tough. Because not letting anyone in is very different than being resilient. And resiliency is about finding your way through. Right? Are you wearing armor? Are you wearing a mask? Are you trying to, for lack of a better term, I wish I had a better way to state this, to peacock and to show up into the world as someone that you're not, and putting on this bravado and persona to shut down the outside world? That was my experience. And for years and years and years, I would shut down the outside world and I would say, hey, you know what? Whatever your thoughts, feelings, or opinions of me are do not matter, because I'm going to do me. And in my 20s, I thought that worked really well, because on paper, you look at it and go, oh, yeah, I'm just protecting myself, right? I don't want these people to get in. And then what happens and what you start to understand is that the more that you quote unquote protect yourself, the more you're actually pushing people out of and away from your life, to the point where one day your little brother picks up the phone and says, hey, you're a fucking asshole. I don't want to talk to you. And that level of toughness is detrimental in a way that I don't think I understood until I was deeper into my journey of trying to understand who I am as a human being. And then I started to understand the thing about toughness is, can you get through to the next stage without making excuses, without blaming other people, without giving up on the mission? Because so often we just quit. Right? Think about this. How many times in your life you've just quit, even though like your heart is like, I want to do this. You just give up. But then think about the times that you didn't give up and the amazing ability that you have to persevere through the chaos of life. Wow. Holy shit, I did that thing. I showed up for myself. I put myself in a position to be successful. I drove through the chaos of life. I did whatever it took to get to where I wanted to be. That is toughness, resilience, putting yourself in a position of saying no excuses, just results. When I was 25 heading into 26 years old, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said to myself, Michael, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? My toughness, that exterior posturing that I'd been leveraging as a defensive mechanism, what I thought was a protective mechanism, was engulfing my life. It was destroying everything around me. And so on this one hand, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm super tough. Like, nobody's getting in. I'm emotionally shut off. I felt robotic at one point, right? I think a lot of people can relate to this. I felt like a robot. And in feeling like that robot, one of the things that I understood was, when I am in this mode, nobody gets through. That doesn't work. It's not long-term viable. Many people understand this. Many people know this. I think that until you really sit with it, it doesn't make sense. And then I started thinking about, what happens if I turn it off? And it wasn't an overnight process. It took me, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years, right, to get to this place where I could turn off that bravado, because I had this certain extent of self-belief that felt tough, that came off as, which I am hyper competitive. Ask anyone who like for real knows me. I'm a competitor. Like, I love to compete. I love to win, but it was at cost. right? What was the price I was willing to pay to be successful in the endeavors of my life? And often the cost was not only my own mental well-being, but the people around me. And I look at that and I go, that sacrifice does not make sense. There, and the way I think about my life now, there's a 0% chance that I'm going to sacrifice the people who are close to me, who are in my circle, my family, my friends, my business partners, my community, you guys listening and watching this right now, that I'm going to sacrifice you to reach my goal, because I am trying to use my toughness now, like persevering through the chaos of life, to create this incredible wind tunnel that you get to come behind and draft through, right? And what I mean by that is, what I'm trying to step into is breaking down this barrier of having hard conversations with the world in a way that gives everyone the ability to have the same conversation. And that level of toughness is resiliency. Because I'll be honest, and I don't share this a lot, the reality is that I've had to be incredibly tough to get to where I am and building out what I consider to be the future of my world, because people don't want to have the conversation, and that's fine. And sometimes people tell me to shut up, and sometimes people say, who do you think you are? And sometimes, people send me hate mail. I literally have a whole folder of hate mail in my email inbox, like you wouldn't believe it, but I don't talk about it because I want to keep persevering and going forward at all times. And so when I think about what it means to be tough in the context of the life that we live in and the world that we're in right now, I'm thinking about this level of mental acuity required to execute with excellence every single day, even when you don't want to. At the end of the day, and I know this may not translate to everyone, at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, you're going to have to be tough. Let me say that again. At the end of the day, whether you like it or not, you are going to have to be tough. You are going to have to elicit some type of toughness from within yourself to not only persevere, but to be resilient, to make it through the chaos that is being a human being, dealing with deaths, dealing with heartbreak, dealing with failure, dealing with not getting the job, dealing with having to, switch up your entire life so you can go for your dreams, dealing with, whatever that thing is that's happening. And I'm not saying that somehow you are not meant to, if you need to grieve, to be sad, to be angry, upset, hurt, to cry over it, because you should. I hope that you will. Don't be a robot. Don't be Michael at 22 tough, because like that doesn't make sense, right? Be tough in giving yourself the space to be a human being, which for many people can be one of the most difficult things. If you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, if you're a mother or father, if you're a brother or sister, if you're a human being living on planet Earth, one of the most tough things that you can do is give yourself the space to exist within the context of what it is that you need. And often that means tapping into the resiliency that you have to step into and towards greatness. And that's hard. No one great who has ever done anything great did it without a tremendous amount of resiliency and toughness, did it without support, right? Which I talk about all the time, did it without help. And sometimes being tough is you reaching out and going, you know what, I need assistance. I need help in this journey. I need someone to be a part of this with me. Because at the end of the day, like, what do you have to do to get to where you want to go in life? And you can and what I want you to think about, if you take anything away from this today, I want you to think about, is toughness an asset in your life right now? Is toughness an asset in your life right now? Or is toughness a vulnerability because you're wearing a mask, because you're using it as armor, because you're letting it be in your way, because you're telling everyone around you that you don't need them, because your little brother is calling you at 22 and saying you're a fucking asshole, right? What level of tough are you today? What level of tough are you? Because ultimately, like, you have this beautiful ability to leverage resiliency in a practical and powerful way, because we've all been through something. I don't, like, look, real talk, I don't know anyone who hasn't been through the darkness in some capacity. And if you haven't, then I question whether or not you're living or if you're just ignoring, because there's the truth of life on the outside of your comfort. And on the outside of your comfort is going to require that you show up, is going to require that you do things that you never thought you were going to do with people that you never thought you were going to do them with in ways that you never thought you were going to do them. Right. And it takes, let me say this too, and I'm going to wrap it up for today. You have to understand that failure is inevitable. Failure is inevitable. It's the only way you learn. It's the only way I learn. And I used to say I learned the hard way, right? And that does hold true. I think anyone who knows me knows, like, I'm going to put the fork in the electrical socket, which I literally did at 5 years old. I was like, what happens? And then I learned the hard way, don't put the fork in the electrical socket. But with failure, you build resilience to try again. With failure, you learn to be able to trust that even though you may not have the answer on the backside, that you're still going to go for it. With failure, you adapt and you build your toughness. So, my friends, I'm going to leave you with this. What I want you to think about today, as you head into your day, as you head into your life, as you head into your world, as you head into being the leader of your life, the hero of your own story, as you head into being the person that you know that you're capable of being, I want you to ask yourself this question: is my toughness an asset, or is my toughness in my way?